Okay, so in this podcast, we are going to continue working with a phenotypic ratio. Only this one, we are going to practice writing out a phenotypic ratio from scratch with me, which means we're not going to be filling in the blanks like we've been doing so far. So by this point, you should be fairly comfortable finding the parents, foiling, writing out the gametes, filling in the Punnett square, and you should be comfortable um, finding out how many of each type of phenotype we have. And then this podcast will focus on writing out the whole phenotypic ratio. Okay, so here we have a Punnett square problem. Brown is dominant to white, and long tails are dominant to no tails. So we're going to do this problem from start to finish. And the most important thing is that we'll be showing the phenotypic ratio from scratch. So there's no filling in the blanks. We are starting with nothing, and I'll show you how to set it up. So the first thing I'll do is identify my parents, and I'm going to have to FOIL my parents' genotypes and then find out the gametes and put them on the outside of the Punnett square. So I'm going to pause the movie now and do that. Okay, so you can see that the one parent circled in blue had one possible gamete, and then the other parent circled in pink had four different possible gametes. So now the next step in solving a dihybrid Punnett square would be to fill in the boxes and figure out the possible genotypes of the offspring. So I'm going to pause the video and do that part now. Okay, so there are the possible genotypes of the offspring in this problem. So the last step of a dihybrid cross is to fill out the phenotypic ratio. So we'll start by setting it up. So when I set up a phenotypic ratio for a dihybrid cross, I always set it up the same way. I'll put a number for the, or a blank for the first number, and then I'll write the two dominant traits first. So in this problem, the two dominant traits are brown and long tail. Okay, and then the second two traits, combination of traits I'll write is the one dominant, one recessive trait. So one dominant trait would be brown, and then the other one was recessive would be no tail. Okay, and I do the same thing for the next one, only I'm going to switch them. I'll pick the other recessive and then the other dominant one. So again, a combination of one dominant trait and one recessive trait. And then the final combination of phenotypes in a dihybrid Punnett square would be the two recessive traits together. So in this problem, the two recessive traits are white coat and no tail, like that. So now we have to fill in the numbers. So this is where I'm going to go through in the Punnett square and count up how many I have of each. So for brown long tail, I'm looking for anything with a capital B and a capital L. So we have one here and then one here. So it looks like we have two brown-haired, long-tailed cats. Okay, the second one, brown no-tail, we're looking for anything with a capital B, and then no-tail is recessive, so it's going to have two little letters. So it looks like we have one, two of those. And then my other two ones, white long-tail, I would be looking for anything with two little b's and a capital L, and I have none of those in my Punnett square. And then my final combination of phenotypes are both recessive, so all little letters, and I also have none of those. So just like in our monohybrid Punnett squares, zeros are important numbers and ratios, and you have to represent them. So please make sure you include your numbers. So always set up your phenotypic ratio the same. Leave a little space for the number and write the two dominant traits first. Then leave a little space and write a combination of one dominant and one recessive trait, and then switch it for the next number. And then the last combination of traits would be your two recessive traits. And then once you set it up, I always recommend color coding and going through and counting up how many you have of each. All right, thank you guys for watching this podcast on how to do a phenotypic ratio from scratch. It is now important that you guys go out and do some practice on your own.